Did you know that when parents are asked what they would do if they had 1 extra hour every day, most parents say they would use it for sleep? Are you exhausted trying to balance kids, work, and play? Do you want more purpose and less monotony in your life? Do you get overly irritated, frustrated, and angry with your children? If you've answered yes to some of these questions, then I'm glad you're here. I know how busy you are, and I'm not here to take your time. I'm here to help you take it back. Close your windows, open your mind, and let's kick some ass. Hey everybody, and welcome back. I'm with Jay Forte today, my favorite greatness mentor, and we're going to be talking about a subject that's pretty heavy in today's world, and with the amount of technology that we have and what's going on, a lot of times it's very, very difficult for our kids to not only escape the bullying, but then with our digital media, it can make it a whole lot different than when we were growing up. So, Jay, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. I know it's a big topic today, but it's an important one, and as parents, it's something we just all need to be tuned into.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And so I know we talked about doing this episode, and I think a lot of parents out there have been aware for a while now, and it's not being hidden. The mainstream media is actually doing a decent job of bringing out the understanding of what's going on with bullying in schools, but I don't know that parents are still really equipped in how to kind of deal with these things or completely aware of the ground truth, as it were. So if you could kind of share with me some of your research and what you've found on this topic, I think it would be hugely beneficial to parents.
Yeah, Michael, as we were talking about, having this greatness conversation, we just really want our kids to show up big to the world, and part of that being big is being authentic. And to me, bullying is the collision of being authentic and unique with a world that doesn't want you to be. So in 1 minute, we really want them to be amazing. In the next minute, we're setting them up for some kind of conflict because the world wants you to blend and we're trying to get them to be who they are. So how do we help guide them in that? So when I was looking into it, I found some pretty alarming statistics. 74% of 8 to 11-year-olds say that bullying and teasing goes on regularly at their school. I couldn't get my head around how that could be. But there's so many things we can do about it. So though we know that it happens, I think the biggest thing to know is that it's part of life, and like anything, we just need to have a plan. And I think in encouraging our kids to be true to who they are, we do in fact set them up to bump into people who want them to be who they think they should be. So how do we just help them get through that? As you were alluding to at the beginning too, I mean, it is harder now more than ever before for a kid because you don't get a chance to do something wrong or bad or by accident in private anymore. You do something in the classroom and all of a sudden everybody's texting it and messaging it and tweeting it and doing all this stuff. And so, it's really hard to be a kid today in a technology world that doesn't let you be human. Because, part of growing up is trying to try some of this stuff out. What works, what doesn't work. And when you bump into something that doesn't work, you need the safety of realizing, look, going forward, I'll know enough not to do that without the world saying, hey, this kid did this in class today. He was so nervous that he peed his pants up in front of the class. I mean, in the past, the worst that happened there was somebody in your class knew it. Now, everybody knows it. And one of the most alarming stats that I saw about the bullying, and the bullying also comes partly in the physical stuff, but it's really the social and the emotional stuff that's really tough. And the alarming stats that I saw were the number of kids that committed suicide when they did something human and the world around them didn't let up on the fact that they did it. And I don't know, as a parent, my kids are a little bit older, so my kids are in their 20s. But watching parents who have young kids now, how do we help them be strong when they accidentally act like a human? Because that's what we all do. So the stats on it say, look, it's going on everywhere. What's our plan? And I think that's a really good conversation we need to have.
Yeah, and I often encourage parents not to seek perfection. I think that it sets us up actually for greater and greater disappointment in life. And to be great and to be amazing is not to be perfect. we are human beings and we will make mistakes, and those are things that we can then choose to grow from. And sharing that message with our children is just as critical. However, when we're not around and it's just them versus the world, how do you maintain that message, Jay?
Well, I mean, this is where our conversation all the time, Mike, is coaching and parenting. And here's one time where I think there's a really heavy role of parenting, because parenting is more about the telling, and we'll get to the difference between parenting and telling around bullying in a minute. But I think the biggest thing that we need to do is to protect our kids, and that comes with establishing some rules. And to my head, that's all about parenting. This is how I need you to approach the world. How do you know yourself, be yourself, and how do you respect others and let them be themselves? So to tell people, to give them this information and to raise them with that thinking, I think starts to set them up to be confident and strong and courageous as they approach the world. I wish that we're really clear about what a parent's supposed to do in this. Part of it, I guess, the biggest thing in all of the things that I see and watching what happened with my own kids, because I was a kid that was pretty bullied. I mean, I had a speech impediment until I was in high school, and we finally fixed it. So, I mean, I was easy prey. I was a skinny kid with a lot of big hair and a speech impediment, and if that wasn't the easiest thing in the world to make fun of and to bully, the good thing is I had an older brother who just wasn't going to put up with it, which was great for me. So I get it, and one of my kids was pretty bullied for a while too, and they were bullied because they stood out, and they stood out because they were smart. So, all of these things, we're back to the opening message that, we want our kids to stand out and find their place in the world, and sometimes when they do, that sets them up for this. So we just want to build this casing around them with information on the inside and protection on the outside that allows them to show up to the world safe.
So you're saying and I think you're right. I think it ultimately comes back to self-esteem and giving our kids every ounce of positivity and encouragement, and letting them know you are amazing, you are special. I don't think you can. I don't think you can tell your kids enough that you love them. I don't think you can tell them enough how special they are. I don't think you can tell them enough how great and amazing they are. And I think that goes a long way. And I completely agree with you on that. It's about knowing yourself and then being able to trust who you are. That being said, let's get into kind of the meat and potatoes here, because the kid's going to school. He's got self-confidence. He understands it, because I didn't have that, Jay. I was like you. I had glasses, braces, greasy hair. Like, I was this little skinny Italian kid, like 4 foot nothing, going into high school. They're like, "Are you on the right bus?" I was like, I think I am. I hope I am. And so I get to school, and it was like my first day going into high school, and I'm walking up, and I'm pretty excited about it. And then I go to be cool, and I jump over this little bench, and I trip and fall. It was like the quintessential worst day of your freshman year of high school that you could have. So I get it, and I got bullied too. And so when you're going in, how do you where do we start to teach our kids when they come home and say, "Mom, this guy, called me this name, he called me a fag, or he called me, whatever." And so now what do we say to our kid? Where do we start to create the conversation?
I think the fact that we're having a conversation is the important thing. So what are you doing in anticipation? Look, we know that this is going to happen, so what are you building into your relationship with your kids that they can come and comfortably talk to you when this happens? One of the things that I saw over and over, Mike, when I was reading some of these stories of the kids who had gone to the far extreme of this, the bullying was really significant, and they couldn't stand it anymore, and they committed suicide. And there were a lot of those. The biggest thing that they talked about is that we never knew they were in that space. They weren't sharing it with us. We weren't watching for the signals. We didn't see that they were afraid, that their clothes were torn, that they were missing their money, that things that they had, their books were ruined, things that they were doing that were out of character. We weren't noticing it. So the biggest thing, so to me, there's two responses, right? So one is, what do we have to talk about with the kids to help the kid be stronger, and what do we have to do as parents? And I think as parents, we have to tune in more. And I know we're all so busy. In fact, I love your opening, for your podcast all the time. We are busy, but are we busy about the right things with our kids? So how are we watching? We know that from 8 anytime starting after 8 in particular, this stuff goes on in their world. So we just got to know that we're tuned in. Yes, in a minute we'll talk about how do we prepare our kids to be better, but what are we doing differently as parents to say, what are we watching? What are we talking about? How are we building time to have that conversation? And are we noticing the subtle differences in our kids that may indicate something's going on and they're not talking to us about it? Because the danger in this is they don't have anybody to talk to. Because they frequently find that the bullies pick on kids who don't have a network of friends. They're easy prey. They're different. And part of the reason why they don't have a lot of friends is they're different. So they become totally on their own. And based on that, it creates opportunities for the kid to get really bullied and not think they have any kind of support. So parents, the biggest thing is, how do you watch and stay in touch and create the environment where you get to talk about, is everything okay? I won't jump in and solve it for you unless you want me to, but I want to know you're safe. I want to know you're okay. And so how do we have that conversation with our kids if we don't have that conversation with our kids? I think we just have to have it.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you, and it's uncomfortable, and oftentimes we let it go. And, you know, I had a friend recently, my wife and I have a couple good friends, and then their child shot himself, and nobody knew. Nobody had any idea he was upset. Nobody had any idea. And, you know, this is not, there's no blame, there's no judgment, there's no nothing here. It's what can we learn from these experiences? What can we learn? Because, you know, you're right. If we're not really engaged, and I have a question for you. So, as parents, oftentimes we get into this, very parenting, not very coaching style, and we're not really drawing out. We're not asking great questions. So, do you think that kind of sets the stage for kids not to be opening up? I mean, how do we create an environment for our kids where they feel comfortable opening up? They can talk to us about bullying. Because I didn't go to my parents about bullying. I sucked it up. And, I did, I got a little older and I just did unhealthy things to numb myself from it. So how can we, what are you saying here? How do we create these environments? I'm sorry, go ahead. That's a long question.
No, I get it. It's a great question. And to me, this is the proactive piece. So parenting isn't something you start today because you realize you've got a problem. It's the moment that little Zen master lands in your house and totally changes your whole life about how you look at you and your world, is the moment you start and make the commitment about what it is, how we're going to have a conversation. Part of our conversation about when to parent and when to coach is that as our kids get older, we need to get more information out of them. We need to create the routine at dinner, with schoolwork, before bed, or something where the conversation starts, or we get to have a conversation. Kids, ideally, from my perspective, and I just am sharing what I saw with my own kids and what I see parents do now, they look at their parents as these chronic people of telling. So if I tell them I have a problem, if I'm a kid and I tell my parent I have a problem, I'm going to get a load back on it saying, you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this, and really it's not really helping me. Because if I knew enough to do all that stuff, I might do it, but that's their view and not my view. What I really need is for someone to ask me how I'm feeling and how we can collectively talk about where some options are, because I don't know, and maybe you don't know, but maybe together we do know. And the biggest thing, I think, that the kids land in a place that's safe. It's a world that's really unsafe. Everywhere you go, we worry about our kids getting picked up by strangers. We worry about our kids getting bullied. And that's kind of their world. And they see this on TV shows. They see it on video games. They see it on everything. So where is one place for them to be safe? It's got to be home. And at home, it's safe because we can talk about anything. And wherever you are and whatever you've done, we get to deal with it in a way that doesn't make you feel like, you should run away from home. I think knowing you have some place to plug in and be safe allows you to have the courage to go back out to a tough world every morning, if that world is tough. And in that process of being safe, I think the open dialogue generates conversation and action plans on how the parents and kids can work together in a situation that's untenable. In the school, they take my money or they tear up my homework. Okay, well then a parent needs to be involved with a teacher and a principal in order to settle that. we're not going to know if they don't tell us, and they're not going to tell us if they're not safe. So to me, what's the least common denominator here? How have you created a safe environment for your kid to share what's true with their life?
That's a great message for moms and dads. I like the idea of really engaging fathers in this as well, because what do? We fix, right? We're the fixers. We got the nail, we got the hammer, and you come to us and you tell us what's going on, and we're gonna tell you how to fix it. And I think that as fathers, it's time to lighten up a little bit, get a little bit more in touch with our nurturing side, and listen. Listen deeply to what our kids are telling us, because the last thing that we want, and I know it's a hard thing to face, but the last thing we want is to come home to our kid who has overdosed or taken their own life. And if it's more important to us to live in the old paradigm than to kind of be willing to change and not just come with the parent and come with the finger and say this is how it is, then we need to do that. And I know it's hard, and I'm not trying to like punch people in the face here, but at the same time, we have to deal with the reality. And the reality is kids are killing themselves because of bullying, and they don't feel safe at home.
Yeah, and so that brings up two things. One is, how do you have the conversation with a parent? So my question to a parent would be, not that you have to create a safe environment, because now I'm parenting a parent, but I could then coach a parent and say, so what are the ways your kids feel amazingly safe at home? And how do you do that work together? Because your version of it and their version of it, I'm sure, are not the same. So what are you doing to solicit some information? The question to a father would be, so how are you a role model to your kid? Is a really good question, because sometimes we see that the bullies in school are because there are bullies at home. And the father, maybe even the mother, are bullying the kids and each other, and that behavior is learned. So it's a very good question to ask us, what do we show up at home, because that's how we bring it in. So if your kid's the bully, where do you think they're getting it from? It could be at home. It could be that they're seeing other things. And then how would you coach your kid out of being a bully to, is your kid being bullied? And what kind of love and support and safe environment do they have at home so they can then develop a plan? This concept of bullying, Mike, isn't limited to schools. It happens in homes. It happens in families. It happens in the workplace. There's this, incongruity between power, and sometimes people use that in order to take advantage. And it seems part of our hardwiring. It goes on there. So to me, the most practical thing is that we learn early on how to handle them, because we know it will show up over and over and over again in life. The hardest thing, to watch, and to some of the things that I came across when I was doing some research on bullying, wasn't just about the kids. What's the bullying that goes on between husband and wives? The domestic violence is another form of bullying, and it isn't always that the husband does it to the wife. But okay, in that environment, how could that happen? And then it happens with CEOs and high-level people in the workplace. We take advantage of this disproportionate power and my role versus your role. I can make you do whatever I want. I can bully you into behaviors that are not in line with the way that a workplace should have. So it's over and over again. It's this imbalance of power. So, I know I'm going in lots of directions here, and part of it's because it's a really big topic. How do we pull it back to our kids? If your kid is being bullied, create the safe environment, get them to talk about it, and then collectively solve it by saying, help me understand how I can help you in this, and you don't have to be a hero here. You don't have to just learn how to fight and go fight. Let's figure out how our family handles challenges. We do this together. This is how I would like us to do this. And then involve me with your teachers and your principals and everybody else. If you have a bullying kid, this is a perfect time for coaching. You could definitely say, stop bullying to your kid, or you could say, how do you think this makes somebody else feel? What are your other options in order to show up powerful and authentic in the work, in the school environment, where you are not taking victims? I mean, those are really questions that you can ask a kid to say, how am I choosing about these? So, I mean, all of that's out there. This could go on for days and days. I'll finally be quiet and I'll pass it back to you.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I welcome that conversation. And I think you're right; it is a huge topic, and this is not going to be the last time we talk about it. I know that's for sure. But I really liked how you talked about the modeling of the behavior and how oftentimes we can get caught up in societal roles and we can get caught up in doing the things that we're wondering why our kids are doing it, and we just don't see it. So I definitely encourage parents to be introspective and put the oxygen mask on yourself first and take a look at who you're being, right? We always talk about what you're doing, but a lot of times it's about who we're being. What kind of person are we being? And then how is that modeled onto our kids? Why are you being a bully? And it's like, well, it reminds me of that commercial. Remember the drug commercial back in like the early 90s or late 80s? I learned it from watching you, Dad. And it's like, and it's so true. And I see it myself all the time. Whenever I screw up or do something dumb or like, I see my kids do the exact same thing and I'm like, oh man. Like, I'm sitting in the room and I crack my knuckles, right? Not 7 seconds later, all three of my kids are cracking their knuckles. And I'm like, dude, like they are just like sponges.
Yep.
And it's not a bad thing to take a look at yourself and say, and I always encourage parents not to judge themselves, not to say, man, I'm such a, I'm a bully, and don't say I'm a bully. Say I recognize that I've been being a bully. So how can I be differently? How can I give myself a little more self-love so I don't feel the need to create this experience for somebody else?
Well, I think it brings it to the two lessons that I think are the core of what shows up in each of these conversations. Mike, we have this greatness conversation time on your show. It's that, the more aware we are, tuned in at our own behavior and our behavior of our kids, the more information we have so we know in the very next moment what our choices are. And we can't make really good choices without the information. And how do we get the information? Well, we have to stop being so manically busy and show up. We have to really show up, tune in, and pay attention. And in that moment, we have everything we need to decide, is it my behavior that needs changing? Okay, I'll cut myself some slack. I realized I did that, but in the next moment, what do I want instead? So if I'm acting like a bully, I can see it now because I took the time and I saw it. And you know what? And then I can coach my own kids out of acting like that because they saw it from me. And if my own kids are hurting, well, now I've tuned in. I know I might have a report I have to run for work. I'm still trying to get dinner done. But if you've got a kid who's hurting, are you tuned in enough to see the hurt? And the hurt shows up in lots of different ways. A torn backpack, a hole in their pants, homework assignments that are not getting passed in. Something like that says, tune in, pay attention. What do you want to do in the next moment? This can't wait. This kid needs you right now. So, you know what? Dinner's going to be late tonight because we have to have this talk. Or I need to know where you are with this because I want you to know this is the place where you always get to be safe. And I don't know that happens in families. And I think if we could create, as parents, if we choose to create that we choose to show up and say, I want that for my family, and because I want it, here's what I'm going to do. That's how things change. I saw it, I decided what I wanted, and I chose it. Instead of running an autopilot, however I end up is how I end up. And I think the biggest thing about this greatness conversation with parents is intentionality. Be conscious, be aware, see what is, and then choose something intentional to move it to where you'd like it to be.
Jay, you're that was profound. Thank you so much for that. And I think that I think that we should end the conversation on that today. That was beautiful. Thank you. We're going to be back with more conversations on bullying. And I think it's such a big topic and something that we have an opportunity to really address in a big way and do something about. And I couldn't be more thrilled to have you on talking to me about this. Thank you so much, Jay, for your time. And we'll catch you on the flip.
Great. Thanks, Michael.
You're welcome.